Good morning. This is Axel Merk, President Chief Investment Officer of Merk Investments, with my update here on Friday before a long weekend where we don't have to go to work. Well, I guess we are working, but we're working in our shelters as the global economy is trying to open up. It's sputtering a little bit. Um, it's dawning on people that tax revenue are down dramatically. And so in the US, we know what that means. It means less money for police, for fire departments, for schools and whatnot. The same applies well in the rest of the world. It's not always debated as publicly. Discussion of bailouts, not just in the US, but also around the world about whether one should bail out cities and whatnot. Um, and depending on where one is politically on these things, one has different opinions. The challenge with these things is that they can get very politicized, and when you bail out a city that's not being taking care of its own finances, then obviously something like this crisis we have right now can push them over the edge. But a lot of people will not be willing to bail out the neighboring city, the neighboring state, the neighboring country, and so the sort of weaknesses are coming to the forefront. Let me give a quick data update and then ramble on a few things that are on my mind. S&P futures are kind of flattish. The Dow is just down 150. The Dow is down 130 right now. The bonds are stronger. 5 ticks up on the 10-year, 14 ticks up on the 30-year. The 3-month Treasuries are 11 basis points. The 3-month LIBOR rate is at 36 basis points. The effective Fed funds rate is at 5 basis points. The VIX is at 29.97, so about 30, with a positively sloped yield curve. Global markets are kind of flattish. A huge outlier is Hong Kong, down 5.6%. That is because of the proposed law that the Chinese want to impose on Hong Kong. And so, and before I talk about that, just the rest of the data here. Crude is weaker today. It's down 4% at 32.45. I haven't had that in a while, that we can be down 4%. It's still above 30, right? Brent is down a little under 4%, and it's at 34.70. And the price of gold is up today, is up 0.5% at $8 at 17.35. And the futures market is just a tad above that. And that's how it should be, because it's the June futures contract. And what and let me just put up my disclosure, since I should do that every time somewhere along the way. But obviously, I'm not recommending that anybody buy futures, but to just explain that, since there has been a lot of attention on the COMEX, for physical commodities, and I'm giving the example here of gold here. If you have a futures contract and are short, then you can deliver the gold at any day during the month. And so for the June contract, you can do that any day during the month. And if you're long, you may get hit with a notice that you will receive the gold. And then, just like with oil, you get a notice that that's going to be stored for you. And so it's not all that different from that point of view. But because the June is coming up, if in a normal market, when there's no other dislocation because of logistical or storage capacity or others, the prices should converge as we approach then the end of May in this case. Good. Then, other than that, I'm pausing here because many of you have heard of that of the aviation accident in Pakistan, and it turns out the Pakistani currency is the strongest one on my board. I don't have all the currencies here on the board, but this is one of the currencies watching, is up by 17 basis points. The weakest one is the ruble on that board. These are the emerging markets, down 1.25, with South African rand also down 90 basis points. In the G10, in the major currencies, the yen is flattish, up 3 basis points. And the Norwegian crown is down 80 basis points. Australian dollar is down 78 basis points. Fitch, the rating agency, reaffirmed the rating for Australia, but gave it a negative outlook. Australia, more so than other countries, is very keen on keeping that rating. And so they're all struggling, obviously, with the huge expense that comes with this thing. Expenses go up and revenue go down. That's usually not a good recipe. I hear parties around the world, the more fiscally conservative ones, speak up now. They always tend to speak up after spending the money, but depending on the country you're in, they are more or less credible. Germany, for example, has been very credible in reducing the overall government debt and have now opened. Spent a lot of money, but now are starting to talk again that maybe we have to rein it in a little bit. In the US, not so much. There's a lot of talk that more stimulus is needed. The initial jobless claims out yesterday were again very bad. Almost certainly the unemployment rate is now above 20%, and that's obviously a huge number. There's talk out yesterday, and I would agree with that we see a substantial shift of how the economy is operating that's going to be more permanent. It is not that we turned off the switch to shut off the economy and now we're turning it back on. The new economy will favor jobs that are less contact heavy. And what's different about the US economy versus the other economies is because we are such a dynamic economy. We get the 20% unemployment and then people get a job back, but these may not be the same jobs. Whereas in other countries, they may have done a quote unquote better job in keeping people in their place. And the reason I put it in quotes is because then they're not as able to adjust to a new setting, a new layout. And historically, the US model is very brutal, but has helped in the long run to propel the US way ahead of other countries because of its dynamism and flexibility. Now, obviously, you have a lot of weaker members in the society that have been suffering for an extended period with real wages not going anywhere. And just before the crisis, finally, real wages had been picking up. It remains to be seen what the political fallout will be. That if you have hard workers, that's great. But if hard workers get disappointed all the time, then they'll start changing their views on politics and might vote for more radical politicians on the left and the right. And so let's see what sort of fallout we'll see. And since we're on the political front here, we do have an election coming up at the end of this year, and all kinds of surveys out of who's going to win and whatnot. My own 2 cents is only if one party controls everything, meaning the Congress and the White House, then historically speaking, spending is ramped up because then there's the quote unquote good news about gridlock is that you get nothing done, which means you can't spend too much. So we'll see. We'll see how that's going to play out. On a few other items here, let me just give you an update here on. Let me see. I'd written down a few things, and I am looking down at the screen here. Yeah, trade. The Chinese have indicated they will adhere by the trade deal, and so let's see how they can do that. Obviously, rhetoric has been ratcheting up, and now with the tension with Hong Kong, that's also not considered to be so great. You need to have a bad boy, so to speak, and for the US it's China. And then conversely, of course, if you put yourself in the Chinese shoes, they also need to play tough, right? They have a domestic audience to cater to, and so that can create some negative dynamics. We'll have to see about that. Good. Other than that, I had a few other things on my mind, but let me wrap it up here since it's a day before a long holiday, and let each one of you be safe for this long weekend. Hope you have some place to escape to with social distancing and all to get away from all these things, and have a great long weekend. Take care. Bye.